welcome to Australian Hunger. I'm your host, Ben. Today I've got an interview with Will Haines, who is from Melbourne stoner band Droid, talking about their debut album and their current Australian tour. That very soon. But before I get to that, I want to talk a little bit about nu metal. I believe I've covered this in the past, although the reason I bring it up now is listening this morning to P.O.D. Kast, a podcast that I've been enjoying, and it basically, two guys, they're covering nu metal from a nostalgic perspective. They're going back to some of the albums they loved when they were younger, sort of late teenage, early 20s, and essentially it's nu metal is a genre of nostalgia for them. And I was thinking about that concept, and like nu metal, I think, is a nostalgic genre. It's kind of a dead genre in the fact that there is no new work really being produced which is achieving widespread critical or commercial success. Now, I think there are a couple of examples of bands which have been infusing nu metal into metalcore. King 810 comes to mind, although they've gone in a little bit of a different direction in recent years, as well as some Aussie bands. I think Ocean Grove comes to mind, as well as a couple of others, but they're not really pure in that sense. I'm talking about nu metal as the kind of distinctive flavour that all those American bands produced in the late 90s, early 2000s. And so I think it's really been 15 years since a new band of that kind of style, not a metalcore band which has absorbed those influences, of that kind of style, has produced a sort of recognisable, widespread album. And that's interesting because it basically means that nu metal is, as I said, nostalgic. It means that nu metal is something to be appreciated rather than produced, something to be enjoyed, but from a perspective which invokes your early teenage years. That's a weird place for a genre to be. And for metal, I think it is a very distinct honour, I guess you might call it, because although a lot of these genres have a lot of nostalgia attached to them, so their biggest bands are legacy bands, they are still, in a sense, alive. Doom metal, black metal, death metal, traditional heavy metal, power metal, they all can trace their high points to 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, and they may have experienced a decline, but I think bands are still producing really good albums in each of those traditions. And so it's bizarre for this thing to become around and not just be really popular within the heavy metal community, but be a incredibly well-selling genre at the last gasp of the CD era, of the music actually making money for lesser acts era. And now you obviously have a bunch of bands which belong to that and are still sort of playing, still making records, which to varying degrees have success. Korn, Slipknot, Rage Against the Machine is coming back, although they're slightly different, I guess. Rap metal, that's something which certainly fell off a cliff. But so we don't really have, the genre kind of doesn't exist in any real sense. You wouldn't say that someone's a vanguard of the nu metal community because, I don't know, and this may just be my ignorance, but I don't think we have any kind of really good example of new bands coming out and producing really interesting work. Obviously, there are bands, I see occasional bands producing nu metal, and it fucking sucks. It fucking sucks. To all extents and purposes. It is dead. And that is distinct, and it's something that's really interesting given the fact that it's not just a niche genre which had a little bit of success and died. It was a popular genre. Some of the best-selling metal albums, I think are possibly nu metal albums. I'd have to go check that, but there are certainly platinum nu metal albums. So it's not like the genre didn't go anywhere. It was incredibly successful during its small window of opportunity. And so that's kind of a fascinating thing that happened. And it would be interesting to see, sort of put that in perspective. Maybe it's the fact that it was popular that it failed to sustain itself, because popular music relies on a sort of ever cycling, trends. That's perhaps my overly cynical perspective. Whereas heavy metal music tends to, and maybe this might just be how it currently exists now, rather than the early 2000s, late 90s, which is my understanding was a bit of a low point. But it's able to sustain genres because you have bands which are continually revitalizing it. I mean, speed metal, sort of blackened speed metal, which I think was really at its height in the mid-80s. I came across a terrific blackened, sort of black speed metal album the other day. And, I don't know if you can say that necessarily about something like nu metal. Will Haines, I talked to him last week. He's one of the vocalists and a bassist for Melbourne stoner band Droid. They released their debut album late last year, Hyperreality, and they're currently finishing off their Australian tour. So they're going to be playing on the 15th of February in Melbourne, the 22nd of February in Bendigo, the 6th of March in Hobart, the 7th of March in Launceston. They'll also be participating in Armageddon 4 in Perth on May 23rd and Woefest in Melbourne on May 31st. The songs I played during the interview were Mouth of the Hound and Ant Queen. This is Will Haines. So let's go back to the beginning. I believe the band started about in 2017-ish. How'd that come around?
Yeah, that's right. Probably about mid 2017. We're all mates. Like, I went to school with Richard, the vocalist and guitarist. He's the same age as me. And then Tim, the other guitarist, has been a friend for a long time as well. We all grew up in a town called Wangaratta, but moved to Melbourne when we were about 18, 19. So yeah, those guys, I've been trying to start a band with Dick for years, and it just sort of nothing ever happened. And then I actually stopped playing music for probably like 5 years. I didn't pick up any instruments at all. And then Tim and Richard were starting a band, and they were looking for a bass player, and they sort of twisted my arm into picking it up again and playing. And then I said yes to that. And then we had another drummer to begin with, Nick Nolan, and then he had too many work commitments and stuff, so we ended up getting Jeremy, which is like a mutual friend, with some other guys I knew from Wangaratta, and yeah, that's how it sort of kicked off.
Mm-hmm. How did the name Droid come about?
We had like a short list. We're just going through names and we keep thinking back to that Simpsons episode where you want a name. You don't want a name that's too funny, but you don't want a name that's too serious, or like there's so many of those metal names that are just a bit on the nose, and same with the whole Doom scene. So I don't know, we're all into sci-fi, and we're actually not that huge of a Star Wars nerds as people think. We do like it, but it's not directly related to Star Wars. I don't know, to be honest. It's a short list, and then we just liked a band name that had one word, simple, to the point, and sort of gives that vibe of futuristic and sci-fi vibes that we're into.
So in 2017, you released your first EP. Talk a little bit about how you guys worked on that, how that sort of came around.
The first song that Richard wrote was Thunder Mountain Wizard, which that was the first thing we ever jammed on, pretty much. So we knew that was going to be on there. And then it sort of got changed at the last minute, and I wrote that intro and outro riff because we recorded drums and we weren't happy with the riffs that we had there, so we changed it at the last minute. We had to I had to make something up to fit the 3/4 pattern, which became what the riff is now. And then, yeah, it was just a bunch of other random riffs and stuff that mostly me and Richard put together. It was all kind of like we were just sort of learning as we were going. None of us really had much of an idea about writing stoner music or doom music, whatever you want to call it. So we just sort of, it was just whatever came to us at the time. And then we just booked a rehearsal space and hired some microphones and just tracked it ourselves and put it out, which was, yeah, people seemed to like it, which was cool.
No, I remember it coming out Oh God, it's 2.5 years ago now. Um,
It's crazy.
so you sound like this is kind of your first sort of putting something out, releasing music, right?
It's not. It's not actually for any of us. I don't think. Like,
Oh,
I was
really?
playing in hardcore bands when I was maybe like 14 through to like 18 or something. Hardcore punk. I guess metal bands as well. So we've all been playing music for a long time, and we've put out like little EPs and demos. But yeah, never up until Hyperreality. Like, that's the most like real professional release any of us have ever put out, no doubt.
Mm-mm. So when did you guys start working on Hyperreality?
We like some of those songs we've had since the start of 2018, like not in their current forms, but like the beginnings of them, like Mouth of the Hound. I think I wrote that riff, yeah, like maybe early 2018, and it's changed a lot since then, like the whole length and different parts of the songs and melodies and stuff. But a lot of the songs were written, yeah, like through 2018 into 2019. The newest one on there would be Fertile Crescent, which was that wasn't written too far out from recording, and that changed a lot in pre-production and actually on the day in the studio. Like, we wrote melodies and we wrote lyrics like literally 20 seconds before walking in and recording them, just at the direction and sort of being pushed by our producer to sort of, work harder and try different things. And yeah, some of them paid off.
Mm-mm. Now, one thing that's really fascinating going from the EP to Hyperreality is like there's a different sort of feel. It's not just refined. Like, it's got a little bit of a different feel. Talk a little bit about what you were aiming for with the record and why you were sort of pushing in a slightly different direction with the album.
Yeah, it's good that you noticed that, because we're definitely trying to do that, I guess we were trying to refine it, but we're also trying to do something that was a little bit, everyone says this, but they want to try and do something that's a bit different. But I guess there's a lot of really long sort of repetitive songs in doom, and that's the whole genre. That's what it is. But we want to keep that element, but also try and make things to the point and not drag on, and sort of, instead of just repeating and like, let's add melodies and let's change keys and stuff like that. So we also, like, we didn't really have any confidence in ourselves as vocalists, like me especially, and Dick included. So like on the first EP, you can tell that we're like really trying to hide the fact that we can't sing under lots of reverb and modulation, whereas we spent more time in the years after that, like, actually trying to sing a bit better, and just especially Richard, like, having a lot more confidence in what he can do and really focusing on vocal melodies and then matching that to guitar melodies and stuff like that. So we want to make it more like a rock album, I guess, like not so much your verse chorus structure, but like strong choruses and like catchy sections with still maintaining all the heaviness. We just sort of wanted to focus more on the songs and not just trying to make the heaviest riffs we could, which is what we're definitely trying to do at the beginning.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've got both those down in the notes, in terms of the vocal effects as well as kind of a more rocky feel. Like, it's kind of interesting coming from like that very, very heavy record. Like, was there anything in the interim that was like, oh, we're gravitating more towards this because we've heard something, or was there outside feedback? How'd you come back to sort of wanting to go in that sort of more rocky direction?
Yeah, I don't think it wasn't a decision. It was just like we didn't have like a goal that we were setting out to. We just sort of had maybe 10, 12 songs, if not all fully written, but all because it's mostly, we don't really write it's all written over computer pretty much. Like, Dick and myself will write riffs and then we'll program drums and we'll play all the instruments and then we'll send it back and forth. So nothing really gets worked on until I'd say like it's a finished song in the computer form. Then we take it to the rehearsal space. So it was just both our own individual influences. Like, I know that me and Dick listened to a lot of Mastodon. Like, we're huge Mastodon fans. Probably like a lot of stuff we grew up with, like listening to lots of Tool, like Smashing Pumpkins. Like, I was I'm a big Primus fan, grew up with a lot of Primus, so like whenever I write stuff, I'm always trying to think about interesting bass lines, and Dick's trying to think of cool, like slightly weird guitar licks, and so is Tim. And then Jeremy's like got his own like really sort of unique style where he just sits back on the beat. So yeah, there was it wasn't a decision made beforehand. It was just sort of all our own little weird influences. Like, Tim's got lots of influence from like Guns N' Roses, and like he loves like glam metal and stuff from the 80s. So you can hear little flickers of that in some of his solos. It all sort of just came together and made something pretty weird, like a melting pot of all our childhood bands.
Mm-hmm. Well, one thing that sort of leans towards that is there's lots of sections in many of the songs where it's kind of like it gets quiet and the song sort of breathes a little bit. It's like, ooh, all right, let's chill out here. It's nothing's being particularly aggressive. And I thought that was a really notable part of the music. Is there anything in particular like that gravitated you towards that kind of approach to some of the structure of the songs?
Yeah, that's a really good point. And that was something that Dave, the guy that we did pre-production with, and George, our producer, they said like you can't underestimate the power of having a good dynamics in your song, because I understand you guys want to be a heavy band, and like that's what we gravitate towards. But if you just have wall-to-wall riffs for 36 minutes of whatever the record is, it loses its potency pretty quickly. And it also just blends together. So if you shift the dynamics and you have quiet sections and you bring the listener in, you take them to another place, and then you just smash them with a huge riff, like you get to appreciate. Like it makes the heavier parts heavier, and it makes the softer parts more interesting. You get drawn into it. So yeah, we were deliberately trying to do that. And I think apart from maybe Ant Queen, the last track, pretty much every song has got some big dynamic shifts like that.
I feel like that's a really important part of some of the sort of better stoner bands, where like you're like chilling and you're kind of waiting for the heaviness to come in, and there's that real anticipation.
Exactly, yeah.
Sort of builds, and it's so kind of, it's a really exhilarating feeling.
Definitely.
I want to build more on sort of how the band writes. So you and Richard, you and Dick, you sort of go back and forth between the computer files. Talk a little bit about how it develops sort of after that when you're rehearsing, and the kind of get a little bit more in depth about pre-production and production and how that kind of influenced some of those songs.
Yeah. So Dick's living in Wangaratta again at the moment, so we don't rehearse that often. If we have a show coming up, we'll rehearse the week before it. We'll try to get 2 in. But we don't rehearse that often, so all our work's done via the computers. So we both just write into Logic. We'll try and work out if we like something. Like I'll make a riff, and then I'll try and build a song, and I'll program the drums all around it. Then we'll send it to our Google Drive file. Everyone will listen to it, give notes, say, yeah, I like that riff, or that's shit, maybe can that, or we'll just sleep on it. After a few days, I might just say myself, like, I hate that, and we'll just forget it again. But yeah, once we've found something that we all seem to like, then we'll take it to, like, we'll say, all right, next rehearsal, let's work on this, and then we'll do that, and then you might flesh it out, and you say, this doesn't actually work that well in the live setting, or it might be awesome, and you like, once you get like a proper drummer behind it, like the whole feel can change, and that often happens because I don't spend too much time programming drums just because it's tedious. But when you get Jeremy actually like in the room and you get his feel, like riffs can change and like things can speed up or slow down. And then like this is what we did last time, what we plan to do again. And this year, everything we had, like, well, sorry, you still there?
Yeah, you broke up for a second there.
Sorry, man, you still there?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Sorry, I was there was another call coming in.
That's right.
Yeah, sorry. So yeah, once we've sort of decided like this is a cool song, we like it. We go to the studio, record it all in a cheaper, like more relaxed studio, which is much more fun to be in. You don't have to stress about being on the clock so much. We record everything we have, and then we'll take that away and start writing vocals to it, and then come back the next weekend, like lay down vocals, and then sort of live with that for a few weeks or months, and then we might be happy with it, or we might add stuff to it, or totally scrap stuff to it. But that seemed to work really well. Like that was probably the most valuable thing that we did on the album, was doing pre-production and actually living with the songs for probably at least 6 months. And then, things did change again the final time we recorded it. But we knew the song so well by the time that we actually went to record them that it was easy, and we were able to sort of work on the fly a bit and change things here and there because we were so comfortable with the tracks.
That's really interesting. In terms of you sort of taking maybe you more in isolation in that sort of first stage, how do you approach generating a riff, generating other ideas of songs, moving it along, progressing it towards some sort of satisfactory stage? How does that work for you?
Usually, like I'll just I know that there's sort of BPMs that we like to play around, usually between 88 and I think 110. I like to play in that sort of range. So I'll usually start by I'll just randomly pick a BPM, and then I'll build a bit of a drum beat, like create a bit of a feel, and then I always start with bass. So like I always just get bass, and I'll try and make a cool bass riff. You can usually tell within the first 15 minutes whether you're going to have a good day. Like if you've got something cool in 15 minutes, like I'll keep working on it. But a lot of the times if I haven't got anything in 15 minutes, then I know that it's just not the right day. So I'll just shut the computer and try again another day. But yeah, on the days that you do get something good, like I'll sort of nut that out. I'll work section by section. I'll go, all right, I don't know what this section is going to be yet, but I'm liking the feel of this. And then that usually leads me to think, I know it would sound good after this. And I go, hang on, that could be a good verse. And then actually this bit that I started on, that would work as a chorus, or that would work as a bridge. And then I'll just build around that, and I'll just do a lot of copying and pasting, because it's just to get the idea across to the other guys. I'll record some guitar poorly, and then it might only be 2 minutes. It might be 2 sections or 3 sections, or it might be 8 minutes and it's a full track. And then we'll upload that and show everybody else. But that's pretty much how every one of our songs has started, apart from maybe the very beginning when we just did do it in 1 or 2 tracks in the organic sense, just in the room together.
Now, I don't want to overemphasize this, but like bass in this kind of doomy, stonery music, I feel like has slightly more prominence, maybe slightly more importance. How does so you sort of primarily being a bassist, how does that play out for you?
Yeah. I think like you can't. There's so many. It all comes back to Geezer Butler, I guess, from Sabbath, like the king of stoner bass. But yeah, it is very important. Like, and I'm no amazing bass player, but it is. I like to put, I'm really influenced by people like Justin Chancellor from Tool, and of course Les Claypool from Primus. But it is, bass is very important, and tone is very important too. Like you fill out that bottom end where the guitars always sit in that sort of the mid-range, and that fuzzy sound, like the drums and the bass really just give all the riffs and give you all that bottom end that people really seem to love, and just that sort of, it gives it the punch that it needs.
Now, you and Richard are both vocalists. I'm not entirely sure like where you guys are in the album. Yeah, can you speak a little bit on that?
So all the good singing, that's Richard. all the other shit, like that's me. Like I'm doing the choruses in Mouth of the Hound. More the aggressive style vocals, like they're kind of in between yelling and poor singing. That's me. Whereas all the clean, nice singing is Richard. It's 90% Richard. I just do some backings and, try and, if there's an aggressive section, we want to just change the feel a little bit, I might do something.
lyrics, you said you had the music laid down, then you wanted to sort of write the vocals for that. How did the lyrics come into that? What was you guys' process for that?
Yeah, it's tough. Like we're both not really confident lyricists, but like we definitely try to steer away from the sort of stereotypical themes that a lot of doom bands, like, I'm not going to be writing songs about weed or like, all the usual occult themes, which it's definitely cool, and I've got no problem with that. I just think it's a little bit done and a bit stale. So we try and, I don't know, just do some weird things, like Fertile Crescent's about Mesopotamia and just ancient history, I guess, and just some cool little trying to put ourselves in those positions, just nothing too deep, just something that might be a little interesting story. Or Ant Queen is just like a sci-fi story about giant ants attacking the world. What else do we have? It's all pretty shallow, nothing too deep to read into, but it's just I don't know, it's mostly sci-fi and sort of history orientated, I guess.
Now you've mentioned that the sci-fi is an attraction for a lot of guys in the band. For you, talk a little bit about what attracts you to that particular topic. I
don't know. I really like film. I like a lot of 80s horror and 80s, 70s and 80s sci-fi movies. I don't know. It's interesting. It's got the thriller aspect, but it's also got the science aspect, and it's good to watch films which make you think a little bit. So we've all sort of got into that genre for that reason. I guess it makes you think. It's not as mind-numbing as blockbuster films. So yeah, it's always been a genre that we all sort of got into, and it seems like a lot of bands in the stoner doom world do as well, just judging by the all the cover art out there.
Going back to some of the sort of other specific musical elements of the album, you recorded Thunder Mountain Wizard as Thunder Mountain. Why'd you want to redo that song for the album that was on the EP? And why'd you sort of switch up the name a little bit?
Yeah, it's a good question. We still, probably the main reason is because that song seems to get such a good reception from people whenever we play it. I think it's pretty weird compared to our other stuff. It's essentially a blues, sort of 12-bar blues in the verse. So it's not really like anything else we've got, but it's catchy, I guess. It's got a catchy section, and it's more friendly, I guess. And we really love the song. So the opening riffs and the outro riffs are like a super heavy, but then you got a catchy middle section. Dick's guitar solo is really cool. So we wanted to do it justice with a proper recording. Like when we first did it, the intro was way too long. It was a little bit on the nose. And then the whole Thunder Mountain Wizard thing, which it is cool. It also is a little bit on the nose. So we're like, the song's changed a little bit. We've shortened it. We've tidied it up. We've added some extra vocals. We've given it what we think it deserves. Let's just drop the Wizard because it's a slightly new track, but still the old track. We'll just call it Thunder Mountain, sort of show that it's matured a little bit into the new 2019 Droid.
Now, I think there were a few samples that I couldn't really pick up where they were from. Where are they from, and what was the intention behind putting them on the songs?
Yeah, that's another. Just like they're mostly from films. I'm just trying to remember which ones that we used. Like the ones we used in Ant Queen are from a film from, I think it's from the 56 called Them.
Of course,
it's definitely from yeah. So there's just some great, like, just classic old film noir sort of quotes in there. And then there's, what else did we use? There's another, I think we might have used, it's hard to remember. I got so many on my computer, like, I'll just sort of go, when you're watching a film, you hear something, you'll be like, oh, that'd be good to use, and I'll just put up this little thing I got on my computer where you can plug it straight in and just record it to the hard drive. It's probably highly illegal, and we may get sued for it. But it's just sometimes you need something like a little bit, just to sort of note a section where it's probably not, it's not right for vocals, but it's a little bit boring, just instrumental, just to sort of something to sort of capture someone's attention.
So it was mastered by Brian Lucy, who I was going through his credits, but I think he did in another Australian band, Sono band. Anyway, I can't remember their name.
Actually, he would have done Drug Cult, I reckon.
Yes, that was it. Why'd you go with him?
Well, George Carpenter, who produced the album and mixed it, engineered the whole thing, he's got a relationship with Brian, who's Brian's like highly respected mastering engineer. I don't know how many Grammys or whatever he's involved with, but he's done everything from Black Keys to like Marilyn Manson and everything in between. We didn't even really know about him until it got to that stage. But George, who's done the Drug Cult previous record, and he's done their new record, which is coming out. He's used him before, and he said he's one of the best. You won't be disappointed. He can be like a little interesting to work with, but we were blown away. Like the before and after, like the mix already sounded great, but when we got it back from Brian, it was just, it was unbelievable, the master. So yeah, that was definitely worth the money. And we were pretty much just listening to whatever George said. We trusted his judgment and his opinion, so he took us in the right direction in that sense.
That's really good. How'd you choose the title?
A lot of the the themes are about kind of like AI, and that's something that I'm really interested in, and just humanoids and all kinds of advances in technology. And we were originally going to call it, what were we going to call it? We had another name that was along those lines, but I think there was already an album called the same thing. And Hyperreality just sort of, it was like, once again, we had this bit of list of like names that sort of jumped out at us, and that sort of captured what Droid's about. It's about technology and futurism and a lot of the topics we talk about. So we just thought it had a cool ring to it, and I guess we went with that. It was kind of it only came about in the last month before, once the album was fully finished, we sort of decided on it.
Mm-hmm. Who did the cover art, and what was their brief for
it? Heath Knock did the cover art. He's a tattoo artist in Sydney. I think we decided by that stage what the album was going to be called, and we sort of briefed him on it and what it meant to us. And I said, I think our original brief was we wanted it to be like it was a confusing one for him. So we wanted it to be like someone in the 1950s was drawing the blueprints for an AI in the future. Like they were looking towards the future, and they were sort of drawing up a sort of a schematic almost of what they imagined like this humanoid skull to look like. And he said, cool, leave it with me. And then he came up with that.
That makes a lot of sense. Moving on to you guys playing live, you've already done a few dates for the tour. How has that gone so far?
Yeah, it's been heaps of fun. So obviously this is our first time ever playing out of Victoria. We went to Adelaide first. We drove, which was it was actually heaps of fun. And Adelaide was really good. There was a really good reception there for us, and like a decent crowd. It was at the Crown and Anchor, which is a really cool pub. All the people that we spoke to afterwards was super nice and really friendly. Like everyone was really supportive. So we were stoked with that. And then we went to Queensland the week after that, and we played in Ipswich, which was like a super strange little, like not strange, but just a different vibe to what we'd played in before. It was this sort of bar in this back street of Ipswich, but that was the same deal. The people that were there were so nice, and we sold heaps of merch. So like we're really grateful for that. Brisbane was small. Like there wasn't many people there. We're a little bit disappointed, but once again, yeah, it was great people, and the venue was awesome. Sound was good. All the bands we've played with so far have been so good. And then we went to Sydney last week or the week before, I think it was. And yeah, that was the highlight so far. Like Frankie's was huge. It was packed. Yeah, it was unreal. The sound was amazing. It was the best sort of proper live sound we'd had since we started, and good backline, great bands. Like all the venue staff was super friendly. So yeah, we were really, really stoked with that one. And then yeah, Melbourne coming up next. I don't know when this is going to be released, but yeah, the Friday the 14th will be Melbourne. So we're hoping that can be even better.
Now, you guys have had the opportunity to play with a few international bands, including Beast Wars, Arc of Ascent, Bongzilla, and Crowbar. Like, is there anything you take away from those experiences?
Yeah, definitely. Professionalism from all those bands has been, even Bongzilla, who definitely live up to their name. Like they're pros when they get on stage. Like they know exactly what they want when it comes to amps and tone and what they need. Who else? Like Beast Wars are a class act. Like they're extremely professional, and they sort of that's something to aspire to. Like if we could ever get to the level of any of those bands, would be extremely, extremely happy, because that's pretty much all you want. You can still live your life, but you can go to another country and play shows to hundreds of people. That's the dream, really. And they do it so well. Crowbar again they're enormous. They're one of the heaviest bands I've ever seen live, I reckon. But yeah, all super friendly guys. Everyone we've met since we've been in the band has been awesome. We really haven't had any bad experiences at all. It's been great.
No, that's great to hear. One last question about you guys playing live. When you are on stage, like, what is it you're trying to do, if you understand what I'm getting at?
Mostly trying not to fuck up. We're mostly trying to play the right frets. No, we're definitely not brilliant musicians by some standards. We can play our own tracks, but yeah, we're just trying to make sure we get a good mix to begin with, because if you can't hear one person, then you're in big trouble. But we're trying to make it as loud as it can be without being too much, but also as just sort of like engrossing. You want people to just get sucked in for 30 minutes, 45 minutes, and just walk away feeling like that was the weirdest, heaviest, like coolest thing I've seen in a long time. That's the main aim of the game, I guess.
A couple last questions about you. When did you first start listening to heavy music? Heavy music, pretty young. Maybe when I was around 13, 14, I reckon, 12. I don't know, around that age. Like I started up, I think I said before, with like Rage Against the Machine and Tool. That was pretty damn heavy at the time. Still is, but for me. And then I went into hardcore bands like Madball, Raised Fist, Terror. They were all really heavy by my standards too. But definitely around that age, I reckon 13-ish, 14-ish, and then I was pretty much hooked. Now, before you was invited to join this band that your friends were forming, were you like interested in stoner music? Was that something that kind of appealed to you?
Yeah, like I'm definitely no lifelong stoner doom fan. I would never claim that, but I'd always been a huge fan of Sabbath, and then I think not long, like yeah, it would have been not long before we started. I think Empress Rising came out by Monolord, and that was one of the first things I heard on the radio where I was like, "What the hell is this?" That was one of the heaviest things I'd ever heard in that sort of slow style, doom style, I guess. But yeah, that really sort of pricked my ears up. And then what else did I listen to? It was all like I was always listening to the classics, but I think in terms of modern doom, it was definitely that Monolord EP or the album that first released that really got me excited. And yeah, that was right around the time that we thought let's start playing this.
Now, when did you start playing bass, and why did you stick with it?
I probably started around the same time as I was saying before, and I think around 13 or 14 when I started high school. Played in like lots of just high school bands and some rock bands and some hardcore bands and like the school band, doing all the nerdy stuff. And then, I stuck with it just because I loved playing it. I just loved playing live and all the cool hangouts you got to do from being in a band. And then, it just kept going until I was probably, I think maybe 22 or something like that. And then work and all that sort of stuff starts to get a bit more serious. And I just, I quit my band that I was in at the time and sold all my gear. So I had nothing. And like I said, I didn't play for 4 or 5 years until Tim and Richard came calling.
Mm-hmm. And how about vocals? I know you say you aren't particularly confident in vocals, but like, how'd you kind of sort of move into that role? I don't know, in this band, any previous bands, and sort of like, what are your feelings about it?
I'm not an overly confident vocalist, but I'm definitely not a shy person. So I wasn't afraid to give it a go, and like I could do some like pretty decent, growly, and definitely not a screamer or anything like that. But I really like bands, especially bands like Mastodon, which have 3 vocalists. It keeps it so interesting, I reckon, when you hear different voices. So we really wanted to try and have that element, like have different voices that you can hear throughout the songs, just to keep it interesting. So I was like, even though I'm not great at it, I'll try my best, and hopefully, I think we've definitely got a bit better over the years, and hopefully we keep getting better. It was mostly just out of the want to keep it interesting to the listener.
Mm-hmm. And one last question: what have you been listening to, reading, watching, or playing lately?
What have I been listening to? Listening to a lot of black metal recently. I really love that record, the first record by Batushka, Litigoria. I don't know how it's pronounced. Something that's insane. What else have I been listening to? Who did we see? We saw that band. I've been listening to a bit of Immortal because I saw that Abbott's coming back this year, so I'll probably go see him. A lot of black metal, really. And watching, I haven't watched anything great recently. The last great thing I saw was that South Korean film. What was it called? Parasite. That was great.
That song you just listened to was Ant Queen, and in the middle of the interview we heard Mouth of the Hound. Thank you again to Will Haines for chatting to me. Those tracks both from Droid's album Hyperreality. Before I let you go, 2 recommendations. First is Blue Mirror by Folian, which is like a reverby post-metal album. A really interesting characteristic of it, though, is that it's got this very deliberate electronic drumming, which lends it a very industrial feel. And it's very much a swirling form of a bunch of different ideas, and it absolutely just works. That's what's really enjoyable about it. The songs can be incredibly different from a very, as I mentioned, industrial-styled, doomy reverb, and sort of leaning on the more distortion end, and then sort of transition into sort of ambience and acoustic guitars. And there's incredible flow throughout that entire thing. So I recommend you check that out. Blue Mirror by Folian. And an album which I think certainly doesn't work as well as that, but I think it's interesting for what it is rather than maybe as good as it is. Translucent Blades by Grin has really varied sounds throughout the album, but one of the things that was really piqued my interest in it was the fact that it features swaths of bass. It's a sort of stonery album, although it sort of varies between how it approaches that from more of a spacey perspective, more of a sludgy perspective, other songs. But it has vast swaths of songs which are unaccompanied bass, where the guitar might just be providing sort of spacey tones, very, very light touch. And it's very interesting to hear something that's stripped back, because usually with stoner music, it's to varying degrees, but like there is often a wall of sound approach where the bass occupies the low end, but then when we get a little bit higher, the guitar helps to fill out that sound. And it is interesting to hear a band which isn't afraid to put away the guitars for a few minutes. Although I think the real issue the album has is it doesn't feel as coherent as it needs to be. You can have really different sounds, but there needs to be a kind of flow through, as Folian sort of demonstrates. But I do recommend you check it out, just because it's something a little bit different. That's Translucent Blades by Grin. You can contact me on social media, AUS Hunger, on Facebook, Twitter and Instagram. And you can also send me an email, australianhunger@gmail.com. Any comments, questions, or if you're in a band and you want to see if we can organise an interview. But until next week, thanks for listening. Bye.